Hey, I'm just gonna talk about my thoughts on psychological types in these videos. I wanted to do something a little more casual and something that I can keep up. I want to keep up my study of psychological types, and so I'm going to do these videos to kind of try to regularly upload and kind of work through my thoughts. Because I think, yeah, the videos I have been doing seem kind of premature. Like I got really excited about a couple of ideas that I felt reformulated the functions and the attitudes in a way that was interesting and exciting. But I got a comment talking about how this really, my way of talking about the types really moves Jung's types from this therapeutic context into this realm of perception, and I felt like it was a fair comment, and it made me want to get more into how this actually hooks into what Jung was doing with the types. So I'm reading Psychological Types. I've actually never read the whole thing. I've only read chapter 10 before. So yeah, I'm just starting at the beginning, and it's actually really interesting. So I haven't fully gotten into Goethe's idea. I don't know how to say it. I haven't fully gotten into Goethe's idea of systole and diastole, but it seems like Jung thinks that the idea of introversion and extroversion has already been formulated, and that Goethe formulated it with this more embracing concept of systole and diastole. Systole, I think, yeah, systole being the movement in, diastole being the movement out. I've only encountered this in Goethe's The Metamorphosis of Plants. It seems to be the only place I've seen that he talks about it. But it's essentially my, like how I've been talking about introversion and extroversion, where it's like this movement towards the many versus this movement towards the one. So I thought that was really cool. I think that, I mean, that was just into the introduction of psychological types. I felt very gratified that, like, okay, I'm not just like crazy formulating the ideas of introversion and extroversion in this way without reference to subjectivity, because Goethe is doing it in a way that just has any center, not just a subject, works as this place of expansion and contraction. Yeah, so that was really interesting. Yeah, and then it makes me think, like, what makes me think, like, okay, what's the use of what I'm doing with this category, the way I talk about introversion and extroversion without special reference to subjectivity? Like, I want to talk about it this way. I want to talk about it this way because the energy of like attention, right? It's moving out and moving towards the object and following the object and moving in towards the subject and kind of the perception of the object. But so there's that movement, like, but it seems that, like, even if we just stick into one's own mental imaginings, like, remove any idea of subject object, which is another thing I'm trying to kind of do, and such that there's only perceptions, right? Like, then introversion and extroversion seem to be operating there too, in that like you can move from objects to other objects. Like that seems to be a movement of extroversion. Like this idea that you'd like, okay, well this thing is related to this thing. Like there's no, like no, without reference to subjectivity there, it's just that this thing is a center of attention, is a center, you know, let's move out from it, this expansive move, or let's move within it and kind of contract it, or contract many things into it. That seems to be a movement of introversion. So that's just kind of like why I want to talk about it this way, because it seems to be, that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about it that way. You can talk about more like that, I think, if the subject is the most important center, acknowledge, like, yeah, obviously, kind of, it's the thing that makes perception possible, but it also like affords other centers of attention. Anyways, that was sort of a rant. But that was related to Goethe on systole and diastole. The other thing that was really striking was this discussion of the Ebionite heresy versus the Docetist heresy in the early church. The Docetist heresy was that Christ did not actually incarnate. It was just the appearance of an incarnation, the appearance of a human form. And then the Ebionite heresy was just that, like, no, Jesus is just the son of Mary and Joseph. He's not the son of God. So this was interesting. I can't actually tell what side Jung is putting the Ebionite heresy on, like whether these break down into introversion or extroversion, because you would think that the extroverted heresy would be the Ebionite heresy, in which, because it like gives value to the appearance. It's like, obviously this is just a guy. There's not this like idea behind the guy that's the thing that's actually important. So like, okay, yeah, that seems like the extroverted move that he's been talking about. But no, because Jung then says that like this is giving, he refers to man as like this function complex, which was striking because he's talking about the incarnation as this function and Christ the man as this function complex, right? And how giving preference to his humanity is kind of is the introverted move to do, because it gives preference to the subject. It gives preference to the function complex. Whereas talking about the incarnation, that being the really real thing, or talking about, you know, his divinity being the really real thing and his humanity being this only apparent thing, that gives preference to the function of which Christ is, it seems. I might have that backwards. Maybe that's why I don't understand why the Ebionite heresy would appear more extroverted, but then he actually says it's introverted. Anyways, it doesn't matter, because what he says about the function complex and the function, is exactly the difference between my definition of introversion and extroversion and his definition of introversion and extroversion. His definition gives preference to the function complex, the thing that's being made by the function, whereas my definition is an attempt to get out of the realm of the function complex and just into the realm of the function. Like, I don't want to talk about any of the contents that are generally associated with the function. I just want to talk about the function, of which the subject is a force, is a product. Yeah, and so if you don't track how that is related, the function is sort of like this, is like the object in this case, it seems. The function complex is like the subject. So, right, so giving preference to function complex is giving preference to the subject, introverted, vice versa, etc. Yeah, so that was really interesting. And also another very gratifying thing, kind of, well, it was gratifying, but it was also kind of like, okay, yeah, what I'm doing is kind of just the naturally extroverted answer to Jung's definition. So if you still think I'm an INTP after that, I mean, gotta be crazy. And yeah, the last thing I guess I want to talk about was I'm only in like chapter 50 or page 50 of chapter 1. But it is very interesting how much his discussion of like nominalism and the Eucharistic stuff kind of smacks of orthodox polemics, or histories of Roman Catholic theology. The way, yeah, like people like Jonathan Pageau and Timothy Petitsis, and even Father Stephen DeYoung talk about Roman Catholic theology. Very much feels like it's similar to Jung's account here, in the beginning of Psychological Types. I guess that wasn't actually the last thing I wanted to talk about. This whole thing about nominalism and realism is also extremely encouraging to me. I mean, I really should have read Psychological Types, the whole thing, because it's just what I've been saying. Really, it's like this giving preference to the idea in introversion is really a way of talking about introversion without reference to the subject, which is amazing. I mean, it's literally like how do the many things cohere into one? Like that's what I've been talking about. So yeah, I kind of feel less crazy having just started this research. Yeah, I feel kind of more on track with what I'm saying, and yeah, I feel like the comments that this is kind of just out of nowhere are a little less justified, because this is what Jung has been talking about. Yeah, I'm still excited to talk about the feeling function, though. I mean, in the last video I did, I still was like stumbling over my words to get a definition that really captures it, but I'm excited to talk about that. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but yeah, this is all very promising. I wanted to say one last thing. I guess I wanted to say it's just not very like well written. The first chapter, at least, is all over the place, and he uses words non-systematically. Like I mean, either he uses words non-systematically, or I'm just not following. But his use of like sensuality and thinking and feeling, I don't think he actually means thinking and feeling functions and sensing functions at that point, and he hasn't mentioned intuition in that vein at all. So I don't know if this is like before he discovered the intuitive function or whatever, that he's writing that. But yeah, very non-systematic, very all over the place in this first chapter, but still very, very interesting. Yeah, those are my notes so far. What do I have written here? I don't know. Oh, inherency. Yeah, very difficult philosophical stuff in this first chapter. But yeah, it's exciting. Whatever.